My name is Anthony Amp Elmore Sr. This video is called Orange Mound Kickboxing Movie Connects Kenya, King, Kennedy, Family, Friendship, Faith, Finance, Food, and Kenyan Tom Mboya. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Anthony Amp Elmore. I am best known in my hometown of Memphis, Tennessee as the 5-time world karate kickboxing champion. Unknown and untold is that I am also Memphis' first independent 35mm theatrical filmmaker, whereas in 1988 we produced not only Memphis' first independent feature film called the Contemporary Gladiator, we produced the first kickboxing film in American history. Now, our plan is to build in Nairobi, Kenya, the largest African American and African culture center in world history. This center will be called the Tom Mboya Dr. Martin Luther King Education and Cultural Center, to be built in Nairobi, Kenya. I want to first of all tell you a little bit about Kenya, and I want Kenyan President Dr. William Ruto to tell you some about Kenya. Let's first of all listen to Dr. William Ruto.
I welcome you to Nairobi, Kenya's capital, with the distinction of being the only city with a national wildlife park on one side and a closed canopy forest on the other. Kenya is a country of innovative, hardworking, hospitable, and ecologically conscious people. It is also a magical place full of delightful attractions with breathtaking diversity of natural flora and fauna, stunning landscapes, vibrant cultures, and an impressive enterprise work and service ethic. Between 4th and the 6th of September this year, Nairobi will host the Africa Climate Summit, where our continent will gather to define and refine its fresh and distinctive position regarding how humanity should engage in effective action in order to save this planet from a climate catastrophe and at the same time lift hundreds of millions out of poverty. As the chairperson of the Committee of African Heads of State and Government on Climate Change, and as President of Kenya, it is an immense privilege to have the honor of inviting fellow heads of state and government from every African nation and throughout the world, heads of national delegations, corporate leaders, and captains of industry, representations of development institutions, and every distinguished participant to Nairobi for the Africa Climate Summit. As Africa, we are committed to bringing everyone on board in order to make every voice to be heard.
AMP has done so much to try to help promote Memphis and international trade with Africa, with Kenya in particular. We've worked with him and will continue to work with him with ambassadors and embassies in Washington trying to promote trade. It's a logical thing to do, and at this time when President Obama is in Kenya and in Ethiopia, and there's a major economic conference going on, and where he'll be speaking, it's imperative that we have Memphis in the forefront to try to take this as an opportunity to promote Memphis and Africa, and that's what AMP's been doing. So I have a proclamation for AMP, which basically states that AMP has been a leader in our community and a leader in the country in trying to promote trade with Africa. Besides his great history as a world karate and kickboxing champion, he's worked hard in Memphis to build economic and cultural ties between Memphis and Africa. And on behalf of the 9th Congressional District, I present this U.S. House of Representatives proclamation to Anthony Amp Elmore, the champion.
This video is titled and a part of a national news release titled Orange Mound Kickboxing Movie Connects Kenya, King, Kennedy, Family, Friendship, Faith, Finance, Food, and Kenyan Tom Mboya. Further it states, Memphis' first independent filmmaker Kickbox Champ Amp Elmore invites Kenyan President William Ruto to Black Orange Mound Hood in honor King, Kenya, and Mboya legacy. You see, on August 28th, 2023, we had the 60th anniversary on the March on Washington, where Dr. Martin Luther King made his iconic I Have a Dream speech. Now, we're asking the Kenyan president to personally come here in Orange Mound to speak to Black America. You see, this is the first planned Black community in America built for Blacks, by Blacks, whose history dates back to 2 Black churches in Orange Mound that started in 1879. It happened on August the 15th, 1956, when a 26-year-old Kenyan, it was not Kenya at the time, it was called British East Africa, but this 26-year-old African came to America. Give us a smile, smile,
Show
smile.
them all the beauty they possess inside.
Do it again, do it again.
Them a
Hello everyone, my name is Jordan. So I am 11 years old. I am proud to be at the 60th Tom Mboya celebration. I'm going to share a quote with you guys from Tom Mboya. I have news for you. There is no Superman, it's up to us. Internationally, when people think of Memphis, they think of Graceland or the events that occurred at the now National Civil Rights Museum. Memphis is much more than that. We are America's distribution center. We also distribute our music and goodwill to the world. Many years ago, on this land stood a plantation. Today on this land, I have fun learning new techniques from 5-time world karate and kickboxing champion Mr. Anthony Elmore. Mr. Elmore was inspired to create a homecoming celebration to Kenya for all to celebrate and appreciate our journey. Thank you.
Is that the civil rights movement was not just a Black movement, but the civil rights movement was a Black movement supported by whites of goodwill. The civil rights movement led to the formation of the American Committee on Africa. The American Committee on Africa, or ACOR as it's called, was formed by a white man by the name of George Hauser and a Black man by the name of Bayard Rustin. Now, on August the 15th, 1956, ACOR brought in a 26-year-old Kenyan by the name of Tom Mboya. Now, ACOR was an organization whose goal was to support the liberation struggles against colonialism, apartheid, and informing the American public about African issues. So they brought in 26-year-old Tom Mboya, who had written a pamphlet called The Kenyan Question, The African Answer. Now, Tom Mboya was an African trade unionist, educationist, Pan-Africanist, author, and independence activist. Most important is the fact that Tom Mboya was one of Kenya's founding fathers, and it was the American Civil Rights Movement that supported Tom Mboya. Tom Mboya understood that if Kenya was to become an independent nation, then its populace had to be educated so they could run a government after the British were to leave Kenya. And Mboya's first major achievement in America was gaining the support of civil rights leader A. Philip Randolph. He was president of the Black Pullman Porters. A. Philip Randolph became not only a mentor to Tom Mboya, A. Philip Randolph via the AFL-CIO gave Tom Mboya a $34,000 check to build a union hall in Kenya. Mind you, Kenya at the time was a British protectorate. It was called British East Africa. This donation secured Tom Mboya at becoming a bona fide leader and player in Kenya. Tom Mboya was invited to speak at colleges in America, and while at those colleges, Tom Mboya would talk to the college presidents about awarding scholarship to African students. In fact, Tom Mboya was so successful at getting scholarships and transportation for African students that he became almost a folk hero in America. Tom Mboya, in fact, in 1959 was scheduled for a 6-week speaking tour about Africa, about its issues, and Tom Mboya became, in fact, the de facto leader of all of Africa. But doing his speaking tours in America, it was so successful that he had sellout audiences that they had to book 10 additional days for him to speak even in Canada because people wanted to hear this young, brilliant African scholar, a very articulate Tom Mboya. He made over 100 engagements speaking as much as 6 times a day. He didn't have notes. His tour was so successful that he awakened Black Americans to the acceptance of identifying with their African heritage. Tom Mboya created so much enthusiasm and change in America that he was able to acquire so many scholarships for African students that they had to charter an airplane to bring African students from Nairobi to New York. This is in 1959. The program was called Airlift America. The program was so successful that it didn't gain the endorsements of singer Harry Belafonte, baseball great Jackie Robinson, and actor Sidney Poitier, who lent their names on a letter asking Americans to donate money to help Africans to secure travel to America. This program was called Airlift America in 1959. In 1959, they brought separately from the 81 original students, there was a young man who came to school in Hawaii, and his name was Barack Obama Sr. On April the 11th, 1959, Tom Mboya not only marched with Dr. King, Tom Mboya spoke at a Dr. King rally. And on May 13th, 1959, the SCLC and Dr. Martin Luther King sponsored Tom Mboya an African Freedom Dinner. Also in 1959, Tom Mboya was so popular in America that Howard University awarded him an honorary doctorate degree. Tom Mboya was a part of the American Civil Rights Movement, and the American Civil Rights Movement was a part of Africa, and all of this coincided together. Please note that it was the I Left American program where the 23-year-old Kenyan Barack Obama Sr. would come to America. Thomas Joseph Mboya was so significant in America that his program influenced our 1960 presidential election. Now, do not take my word for it. Just Google the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum, and what you will find, it reads, quote, "At a key point in the 1960 presidential campaign, a dynamic young leader from Kenya named Tom Mboya visited Senator John F. Kennedy. Mboya led a campaign of his own that would eventually bring hundreds of African students to America for higher education, including Barack Obama Sr., President Obama's father. Kennedy's decision to support the effort became an issue in the election and possibly a factor in its narrow victory." Unquote. Let me share some intricate details about John F. Kennedy's 1960 election campaign. In 1960, black people were Republicans associated with the Lincoln Party. Now, Richard Nixon was Republican, and even Dr. Martin Luther King's father and the black ministers supported Richard Nixon because black people and black ministers were not about to support Kennedy, who was a Catholic. And Kennedy had to find a way to make inroads into the black community. And what Kennedy did as part of his presidential platform was Kennedy made it a part of his platform that he would support the education of African leaders, and he would support the education of Africans. That was part of his platform. Now, this education of Africans did not bother white people, but it endured black people to support Kenya or support Kennedy because Kennedy was supporting black people. Now, it was in March of 1960 that Time magazine put Tom Mboya on its cover. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please understand that we were in Jim Crow America, and you got a black man on the cover of Time magazine. This was a great achievement for black America. Black America had gotten involved in I Left America. They gave $1, $2, $3. They gave all that they could. Most importantly, the I Left America program, that it was in I think it was July the 26th, 1960, Tom Mboya was facing a crisis. He had so many students with scholarships and they had no money, and the new Democratic nominee was John F. Kennedy, and John F. Kennedy allowed Tom Mboya to come to speak with him, and John F. Kennedy agreed in July of 1960 that since they could not find sponsorship, he did not want to let these scholarships go to waste, and the Kennedy Foundation agreed to spend $100,000 to bring these African students to America. Now, Kennedy did this on condition that this donation be kept anonymous. But the Nixon campaign found out about it. There was a big hearing in Congress, and it was later found out that John F. Kennedy agreed to give this money, not to buy the black vote, but he was authentically trying to help Africans get an education. And when this information hit the news in America, it changed the hearts and minds of many black people in America. Most importantly, this effort that Kennedy did changed the mind of singer Harry Belafonte. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's go back to 1960. The most popular singer and most popular black singer in America was Harry Belafonte, who in 1956 he sold 1 million albums. The most important endorsement that John F. Kennedy was to gain in 1960 was the endorsement of singer Harry Belafonte, who was like the Michael Jackson of his time. Even though he was not a politician or religious guy, he was simply an entertainer. The first thing that I want you to see, I want you to see and hear Harry Belafonte. Now, the Kennedy-Tom Mboya connection got John F. Kennedy the black vote that he was needed. Now, John F. Kennedy died of an assassin's bullet in 1963, November 22nd. Kenya became a free country on December 12, 1963. 1960, it was civil rights attorney and Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall who went to London, and it was Thurgood Marshall who wrote Kenya's Bill of Rights and Constitution. It was the civil rights movement that was a part of the birth of Kenya. We have our United States Congressman prepared to visit Kenya. Elmore asked Congressman Cohen to use his influence to ensure that the pioneers like Thurgood Marshall, who wrote Kenya's first constitution, Harry Belafonte, Jackie Robinson, Sidney Poitier, Eleanor Roosevelt, A. Philip Randolph, President John F. Kennedy, and all the Americans who supported the birth of Kenya be properly honored. We want to develop a trade deal with Kenya. An acronym for trade means transforming, repositioning African descendants economics. African Americans in 2019 spent $109.4 billion in leisure travel. It makes sense that Kenya should be the home of the first and world's largest African and African American family, trade, culture, and education center. There is no other African country that has influenced modern American history and culture more than Kenya. The center in Kenya will not be just one building, but the venue will be a cultural city for education, entertainment, and economic. You see, the educator Booker T. Washington, in his book Up From Slavery, in 1901 autobiography, noted that blacks did not get an education in agriculture and mechanics, whereas how to make stuff. You see, one of the simple things that black people have is a multi-billion-dollar hair industry, whereas our black hair is made in Korea. We must begin to take the efforts to make products for ourselves. And we have to do this by learning agriculture and mechanics and learn how to make products for ourselves. Now, let me explain why African leaders should come to this home in Orange Mound in Memphis, Tennessee. See, you should come to this house because this is the most African house in America. Let me explain. You see, look at these doors. We went to Africa, and I went particularly to Ghana. And I went to Ghana, and I made everything. All of the furniture was made in this house, was made for this house, was made in Ghana. Now, they didn't have running water, they didn't have electricity, or not even a roof. But we were able to go to Africa and furnish our 5,000 square foot house in America with over 50 hand-carved doors. We did African everything. We made the draperies, all of the furniture, all of the accessories. Now, this is what we should relate, or we want to relate to the Kenyan president. Kenya has all of the resources to make furnishings for America. We can make products for America, but no one has taken the time to create a distribution, a manufacturing, a distribution, a sales program to whereas we can create African and African American business right now as Kenya and right now as Africa is today. We can create furnishings. See, African Americans spend over $600 billion a year on home furnishings. We can create millions and billions of dollars for Africa just through home furnishings. Let me explain. You see, we created a program called the Safari Initiative. The word Safari is an acronym to mean Style, African Family Application Renaissance Initiative. But in the F of Safari, that means family, finance, food. You see, faith. You see, what happens is this. See, styled African. You see, these doors are styled African. You see, you can go to a furniture store and there's early American, there's Old English, there's Italian, there's French, there's Mexican, there's all kind of ethnic things. But what we don't have is that you cannot go to a store in America and find African furnishings because no one has developed the styled African or created an industry where young people, where black people can go and they have a choice. You see, if we had a choice of buying whether English or Oriental, we want to have a world where Africa is inclusive. Now, why should the African leaders come here? They should come here in Orange Mound because they should support the model. We are the model of African and African American trade because we showed that what we got, we can make products for the American market. Anyway, like one example, I started traveling to Kenya in 1990 where we created the first African and African American trade deal in Kenya, whereas right here in this very home, we created the first 35 millimeter independent film in Memphis film history. But not only did we create the first 35 millimeter theatrical film in Memphis film history, we created right here the first kickboxing film in American film history, whereas we can be honored and know that by the National Film Registry of the United States Congress, whereas they select films not as the best films, but they select films as those who have the most aesthetically, cultural, and historic significance to America, whereas we created the first kickboxing film in American film history. You see, I want you to note, and I want you to see a commercial that I made in Kenya. Now, I made this commercial 34 years ago of promoting Kenya. Let's look at this commercial first.
Contemporary Amp Elmore here to tell you about an exciting African tour we have planned. On July 16th, I will make history in the country of Kenya when I introduce my sport of kickboxing to the country of Kenya. Over the past 3 years, Memphians have been joining me on great, exciting cultural safaris throughout the country of Kenya. If any of you out there are interested in experiencing a great time in Africa, then call me at Contemporary Amp Elmore at 452-5705, 452-5705.
You see, in 2004, I got Kenya honored in our Memphis, Africa in April celebration. Now, you see a picture of me, this is in 2004, you see a picture of me in Kenya in 2005 with then Kenya's Minister of Tourism, Najib Balala. You see, I met the Kenyan President, Daniel Arap Moore, in 1992, who named me an African ambassador. I met the Kenyan president, the vice presidents. You look here and you see me traveling to Western Kenya. And what you see me you see me at the Mboya Museum. See, this Mboya Museum is part of the Obama Heritage Tour. For example, I want you to look at me in a place called Kigolo, Kenya. Now, Kigolo, Kenya, it's the home community of the home community where President Barack Obama came from. You see, African Americans and African American tourism. You see, Kenya is a country that has the most beautiful landscape, the most beautiful people, but Kenya does not have an African American tour. We want to show the Kenyan president how Kenya can make billions and millions of dollars just by advertising and promoting to the African American community. They must come here to Memphis, Tennessee. And first of all, what we have is we want to put together the Mboya, Dr. Martin Luther King Education and Cultural Center. Every little black child and every Kenyan should know the relationship between African Americans and Africans, because we have the most significant relationship between African Americans and Africa, because the history of Kenya connects us African and African Americans together. That's why we want to build in 2026. We want to have celebrate Tom Mboya's 70th. See, on August the 15th, 1956, Tom Mboya first came to America. And on August the 15th, 2026 would be Tom Mboya's 70th. And what we want to have in Kenya is have the Tom Mboya 70th by celebrating the legacy of Tom Mboya and Dr. Martin Luther King via us starting the Tom Mboya, Dr. Martin Luther King Education and Cultural Center, and we have a celebration in Kenya called the Kenyan Safari Homecoming Celebration, whereas we invite all of America and all of the world to come to Kenya, where we celebrate our African and African American heritage by what? Having the Tom Mboya, Dr. Martin Luther King Education and Cultural Center. We will have this center built. We also, now understand, it was in 1990 where I came to Kenya to feature or premiere our movie called the Contemporary Gladiator that was made right here. See, it all started in 1990 when we came to Kenya to promote our movie, The Contemporary Gladiator. It is us in Memphis who want to promote the movie, the Tom and Mboya movie, whereas we tell the story as to how Tom and Mboya evolved to come, and from Tom and Mboya came the Barack Obama story, how we got the first black president. But I also want you to see something else, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to see the buttons, the fans. You see, when I was growing up in America, we had, you can go into any of the old folks' house and you would see pictures of Dr. Martin Luther King, John Kennedy, and Robert Kennedy. And it was said they were freedom fighters. They fought for our civil rights. We grew up honoring President Kennedy and Robert Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King because we grew up that way. As a child, I would see the buttons and we would see the fans and we would see these things. Now, as a person growing up and learning that it was President John F. Kennedy and it was Tom and Mboya who helped President Kennedy get elected, and we have a special way to honor all the pioneers of African and African American history who helped make Kenya a country. And we want to come to Kenya and we want to celebrate our legacy. This legacy is so important, and we want the Kenyan president and the Kenyan leaders to come here to learn, to come and be excited and honor the first all-African house in America. But more importantly, we want to build a trade, a family, and a cultural relationship between Africa and African Americans. Thank you very much.